canvassing. Transportation. Okay. So when we think of all these things, I guess it covers under relationships. What are some of our big issues right now? Losing language? Yeah, you're right. It's hard to. Yeah, go put this language here just so we have that one. Okay, so those key issues. So language, definitely.
I think one of the main ones is including in the main category is we're separated from each other.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of us is separated. Like, we have our own little cliques.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very damaging. Except for right this minute being in this room, we're connected somehow.
Right. So isolation, yeah, clicks. Try to think back to this sheet that we just got.
Companies raping the land. There's companies raping the land of the industry.
Yep. So destruction of land, health issues.
The other one, the issue is assimilation.
Assimilation?
I get so furious at times when my own people, they're so dark, some of them, and they're young. Oh, yeah, did you go this, and did you do that, and yakety yak, and all this, you know what I'm thinking? Shh. You know? Oh. I know it's, that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Regaining our culture, learning it, like identity.
Culture, yeah. Culture and identity. So if you think of, and we can go on, it'll be on the test. If you look at those systems that existed before, that's what you're going to find as issues now. Why?
I think one reason why is because we're here to teach the white people something that's good in life.
Something that's good in life. So that responsibility piece,
Yes.
right? And I think that when I think of the Declaration, that's what I think is responsibility.
And
What?
that's what we're doing now. We're responsible for these people. I don't like that wording.
So when you look at and you compare them, you're going to see, if you look at those pre-contact systems, there's almost like, for lack of a better word, I guess, an attack on each of those things in different ways. Now I think some people would argue that now it's very, I guess, subtle, but it's still an attack is an attack, right? So I want to show you a quick little video. It's about a minute, and I just am hoping that this is all going to work out for us. Or not.
Is it in Chrome on the right?
It is gone.
Yellow, green,
Is it up here?
Yeah.
It's frozen. Again. Let it go.
There we go.
Okay. So when I was 3, you don't want to hear those stories.
You can act it out, Kel.
I do have one I could act out. And I tell people it just because I know it's going to come back at some point. All right. Now, if I press play, is the volume going to be everything? I'll just...
It should be okay.
Ta-da? Okay. It's amazing how you get used to technology being so quick, and then when it's not, like I really do want to click even though I know I shouldn't. It's going to make it worse. So this video here, when it does come up, in my opinion, this is an example, and this is what the activities that we're going to do are specific to these pieces of the declaration, in that, or the articles in the declaration, in that what I want to do in groups, you're not going to have to read all 46. However, you will get a few, and we're going to have a little bit of group discussion on what that implementation looks like. And as a teacher, for me, this is an example of another teacher, what they used in their classroom as a way to implement some of this and get students talking. Everybody up and down. Just going to press it once. Okay. So on the end, you noted that it did say Canada was one of them, but as we noted earlier, Canada has since in 2010 supported the declaration. So those 4 that didn't, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States of America. Anybody have any thoughts about why they wouldn't want to sign in 2007?
We have the most out of originals. We have the highest private population leverage.
So what would that be? What would that, I don't want to use the word force, but force them to start having discussions about the way that they treat their Indigenous population, right? So when we look at, oh my goodness. This is the KTI website. Yes, allow, please. Okay. So as Stephanie mentioned, I'm not going to go into specific detail because you kind of covered some of the background pieces already. But essentially, that declaration sets out the minimum rights of Indigenous peoples. Okay. The key word in that sentence is minimum. Okay. The articles set out the rights. They are the heart of the UN Declaration. As she noted, there's 46 articles, and they should be. This is the most important part, I would say, for me, anyways, is that the articles should be read together we must not think of each article as separate to the other articles. So even that way of looking at things in the holistic way, the declaration should be looked at that way. When we do our activities, we're going to look at them separately, but in the sense of the whole room, it should be looked at all together and not be pulled apart. Also, the UN Declaration recognizes rights of Indigenous people, but also recognizes that some rights are collective rights belonging to the entire communities or nations of peoples. And the UN Declaration should be read with other international human rights instruments to understand the full range of Indigenous people's rights. That's like a little disclaimer.
Did she answer this question?
Okay. So as noted by Stephanie, it was signed on September 13, 2007. And of those 193 nations, the 4 that I had said didn't sign, there was 11 that didn't vote. Okay. So this day, this is a little quote that I wanted to include, will be remembered as the day when the United Nations and its member states, together with Indigenous peoples, reconciled the past painful histories and decided to march into the future on the path of human rights. So when we're talking about reconciling the past painful issues, I see it completely relating to this. Because how we got from here to here is based on this. And it's based on the land that we live on. So when we talk about how we're connected to the land, the main, when you look at the Indian Act, the main components of it is about land. So removing a people from their land, their language, their culture, that was purposeful. And so this as a declaration, going forward, its intent or the spirit of it is reconciliation. Okay? I should get one of those. Oh, okay. So there's some main themes in the declaration. So the first one is the right to self-determination. The second is the right to be recognized as distinct peoples. The third is the right to free, prior, and informed consent. And the last as far as the main theme is the right to be free of discrimination. These themes are important to keep in mind as you read the declaration. So for the declaration, this is what I did. Because I want you guys to get a sense of, sort of like a snapshot of what it is and the articles kind of clumped together. And then we can do the activity, okay? So I will read you some of these, and these are obviously, like when you compare, I condensed it in a sense so you can get the main idea of what each article is, okay? So Articles 1 to 6 contain the following: the right to self-determination, the right to cultural identity, the right to free, prior, and informed consent, and protection from discrimination. Regarding the right to self-determination, exercising the right to self-determination may have a different application for different communities. So this is something that, just some points to keep in mind. Indigenous communities have a right to work with the Canadian government to negotiate their relationship with Canada. So the other part of this, and you'll see in another slide, is when we think of our treaty relationship, there's a right to negotiate the relationship. That right still exists, okay? Indigenous communities have the right to their own institutions, including in areas of justice, education, health, economic development, etc. Negotiating treaties was and continues to be a way to assert the right of self-determination. Self-determination also means that Indigenous people get to participate in Canadian politics, including provincial and federal elections. And self-determination includes a right to participate in international forums. So that right to participate in international forums, the other thing that I think is important to remember is that capacity building that happens when we, as nations, talk to each other. And, that best practices piece and how you move forward from that, that's important. And that's a right? Because part of assimilation is stopping that. right? Preventing that from happening. Right to life, integrity, and security. So Article 7 to 10, right to life, liberty, and security. Indigenous peoples and individuals have the right not to be assimilated. Right to belong to an Indigenous community or nation, and right not to be removed or relocated from their lands. So on this piece here, when we were talking, maybe I should just give a little bit of a background on some dates. So everybody knows what 1867 is, right? Right? Okay. So I'm going to go back further though. 1763 is a royal proclamation. You've probably heard of it. Some of you are probably, well versed in it, and maybe some of you aren't. Essentially, some of the key pieces there, what that did is set up the treaty making process, or I would say acknowledged Indigenous rights, but they didn't really have to be acknowledged. I was trying to find a way how to say that, because it already exists. We already have it. And in that proclamation going forward, so Britain, with the Royal Proclamation, essentially says that treaty can be made, but lands can't be just arbitrarily sold. Okay, so then you see Canada becoming born. And you'll hear some people too, when they talk about Canada, some people refer to it as a state as opposed to a country. And the reason why they refer to it as a state is because, what do you need for a nation? Language. Identity. Does anybody speak Canadian? What else do you what else do you need? Culture? Government? So the government system in Canada is based on the British system. The Canadian government is based on the British system. And there's one really important one. You need people. Yeah, that's important. You need land. Right? So you'll definitely hear that, or that reference to Canada as referred to as a state. I just got really loud. Sorry. In 1867, the DNA Act created Canada. So as Canada was created, I gotta back up a little bit. 1850. Is that familiar to anybody? Anybody in that table over there? 1850, for example, that is Robinson-Huron and the Superior Treaty. Robinson-Huron and Robinson-Superior Treaty, 1850. So that's where you start to see reserve lands attached to treaty. Then this is like, we're taking a jet right over like history and going really quick and we're not stopping. So 1867, Canada becomes Canada. 1876 is when the Indian Act becomes the Indian Act, which essentially was a bringing together of different pieces of legislation based on land, or control of land, I should say. And that was in 1876. Okay, so when I say our issues and challenges are how we get from here to here, the Indian Act creates that. Okay, so I just want to make sure, just in case I don't want to be jumping too much all over the place. So that one right there, right? You have the right not to be assimilated. Because the reality is, in this country, that didn't exist, right? Right to belong to an Indigenous community or nation, right to be removed, right not to be removed, or relocated from their lands. Okay, rights to culture, religious, and linguistic identity. Right to culture, spiritual and religious traditions and customs, and right to know and use language, histories, and oral traditions. So it comes back to all this. Article 14 to 17, right to education, public information, and employment. Right to the establishments of educational systems and access to culturally sensitive education. Right to cultures and traditions being correctly reflected in education and public information. Right to create their own media in their own language. and right to be treated fairly and not be discriminated against in matters relating to work and employment. Okay? And there's just some examples. You can think of examples like media, for example. APTN is an example of implementing that or going towards that, right? Articles 18 to 24, participation and development. Right to take part in decision-making in all matters affecting them. Free, prior, and informed consent for laws and policies. Does anybody have anything to say about free, prior, and informed consent?
To go onto somebody's property or?
For anything that happens, like a community decision, or or if you have, for example, a company wants to come in and resource development, for example. So there's a lot of, you'll find a lot of, I don't know if it's the right word, tension around free, prior, and informed consent. Because sometimes what's happening is that's not happening, basically, right? So, for example, if something is, there's an example from, I'm going to come back to it, because I have a specific example related to education. Right to have their own political, economic, and social systems, and to follow their own traditional ways of growing food and other activities. Right to improve their economic and social well-being, and right to set out their own priorities and directions for development of their communities, and right to health. So everything there is also related to everything here. Rights to lands, territories, and resources. Right to special and important spiritual relationship with their lands. Right to their lands, territories, and natural resources, including their own land, and to live on and use the land. Right to the land they now live on and use. Right to the areas they traditionally lived on and used. Rights to lands, territories, and natural resources they acquired in other ways, like treaty land entitlements or modern treaties. So when you look at the treaties, what's in a treaty?
Guidelines.
Yeah. So there's guidelines in there. So when you look at the spirit and intent of treaty, it's about sharing, right? So this piece here, for a lot of people, that sharing of resources didn't happen, or isn't happening the way it was intended. Okay? Governments must consult with Aboriginal peoples before allowing any activities on Aboriginal peoples' lands, territories, and resources, and that refers to that free and prior consent. We're so close. Self-government and Indigenous laws, Articles 33 to 37. This is not me, so you know. Right to decide identity, membership, and citizenship. Right to own structures, traditions, and laws, which we talked about laws here. Right to decide what responsibilities individuals and their communities have towards the community as a whole. Right to maintain and develop contacts. Recognition, observance, and enforcement of treaties and agreements. Implementation. So Articles 38 to 42, they basically explain how governments in the United Nations should work together to make the rights of all Indigenous peoples protected, right to have access to support from the international community, and carrying out activities that will lead to this reality. Why is it important to have an international, an international presence when Canada and Indigenous peoples are working together? Anyone want it?
It's almost more connected to the shame.
Exactly.
Is it because our treaties were originally signed with the Queen, so it was an international treaty, right? And not only that, what this table said, is to shame them into change and to
for a process of change. So when you have certain negotiations, in some cases, they're funded by the federal government. So you're essentially negotiating with who's funding you. So, I mean, if you don't want to negotiate anymore, you could just cut the funding. Really, right? Right to access fair conflict resolution with governments or other parties. And that brings us all to 42. See, we just did that the whole wall. Something I wanted to bring up as well that's in there that's very important, Indigenous women's rights. Indigenous women are entitled to all the rights in the UN Declaration. When implementing policies and programs, it is important to make sure Indigenous women's particular needs, if any, are addressed, and the government must work with Indigenous people to end violence against Indigenous women. And when you do your activity, that'll be probably a key one that'll probably come up pretty quick with what's happening right now in our communities. Okay, so this is just a couple things of what you can do to promote the implementation of the Declaration. So organizations can adopt the Declaration. Non-Aboriginal and non-governmental organizations can work with Aboriginal organizations to lobby government and industry to use the UN Declaration. You can use it as a framework to guide your work. Teachers, professors, and other educators can include information on Declaration in their classes to help educate all Canadians on the UN Declaration and its significance to Canada. Because one of the really important things with the Declaration, yes, it's UNDRIP, and it's the focus is Indigenous peoples, but everybody has a responsibility to understand that and know that. Just like everybody has a responsibility to understand their treaty relationship. Okay? So, this is Quinn, and last night when I was thinking living under doesn't make it's not a complete sentence, Laura. but it's not living with or living under. I thought, you know what? No, living under. That's what we're gonna talk about today. Is what's the practical, right? It's not that I'll print out the Declaration and you'll take it with you and all 46 articles and become overwhelmed because a lot of this stuff is heavy, right? And in the afternoon, when you're spending time with Josh and Gloria, that other part of that balance, right? Because a lot of this stuff is heavy. So Quinn, living UNDRIP, is an example of our youth actively implementing UNDRIP. So this is where Lindsay's going to tell a little story and take over and dazzle you. So I'm going to call her up and then we'll get right into our activity.
אני חושב, מנסה כבאסי בישנקאס, נמנוס פניש נאבן נוסים, דקילורם, chinenda mumki. I just want to say thanks to Kelly and Brenda and Steph for extending the invitation to come and share a little bit of what I've learned about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So we kind of rewind about 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago, giving away my age. I got involved with some First Nations youth activism and rights and stuff like that when I was about 24, 25. And it was felt a little bit late in the game, I was going to these conferences with 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And they knew so much more about our rights and our ways as Anishinaabe people. So it was really, really inspiring. And some of you know that I've been able to travel internationally and work with Indigenous peoples in other countries. So that experience was also really inspiring because it opened up a whole new worldview where it helped me understand what our communities would have looked like maybe 50, 60, or 70 years ago. Because some of these communities were still living with no electricity, getting their own water, living off the land, completely off the land, harvesting and hunting, et cetera, et cetera. And then the onset of coming development and industry from who? The government of Canada. So it was a really, really big living and learning experience. Luckily, when I came home, I was invited to join the Ontario First Nations Young People's Council, which is a really popular, and I want to say proactive youth council with the Chiefs of Ontario. There's been a little bit of shuffling around, but I'm happy to say that they are still working together and formulating some new actions and activities that young people can get involved with. So about 3 years ago, we started hosting these youth engagement sessions all across Ontario. And these are really to create what a youth engagement strategy could look like. So how communities, how organizations, how institutions can work with their youth in their community in a really good, meaningful way. So what we did was we traveled to 5 different First Nation communities within Ontario. We held 3-day youth conferences. I think the closest one here was in Kenjgewin. And we asked the young people, how do you want to be engaged? What do you want to be? What do you want your part to be in creating the future of your community? So through those 5 conferences, we had different guest speakers. We had local elders come and share about the history of each community. We had young people stand up and be able to take us for a tour of their community and recognize sacred spaces. But in regards to understanding this declaration, we were so fortunate to have our elder, Sharon Ben, come to each gathering to share with young people from her Cree background and her lawyer background, and her extensive knowledge and actual experiential participation in helping this declaration come forward. So she was there from the beginning, 25 years ago, when they went to Geneva to the United Nations. She was right there with those people, moving these kinds of issues forward for Indigenous peoples all across the world. So having her be with us and kind of put it in a language where young people can understand really helped the young people say, well, we want to recognize that declaration then, and we want to include it in our youth engagement bundle. So out of all those 5 strategy sessions, the youth then created and came together this really awesome youth engagement bundle. So instead of calling it a strategy, they've kind of taken that colonized kind of term and changed it into their own to recognize what this means to them. So included in that bundle, there's tons of things: understanding your name, your identity, your language, understanding your land, connecting with those elders, connecting through different activities, hunting, harvesting, and understanding, like Kelly said, understanding what inherent rights is versus treaty rights, understanding what UNDRIP means to you. And then at one of the engagement sessions, one of our speakers wasn't able to attend, and then the elders and our youth coordinator said, Lindsay, you have to go and talk about UNDRIP. And I said, what? I don't know anything about UNDRIP. I just work with the youth, you know? I just like take them on the land and we have fun. She said, no, that's what you're doing. You're doing the stuff that is in the declaration. So I came home, and after I was traveling internationally, I did some work with the young people here in the community called Love Mother Earth Project. And essentially, I guess that's what we were doing. We were getting back out to the land, we were learning about how to be connected with it. And like Kelly said, that major thing in the Indian Act is about assimilation and taking people away from the land. So in my travels, what I felt was that our major disconnection was that disconnection from the land. And then when you get into that, then you hear, or then you can definitely see the disconnection to the language. Because like one of those quotes in Stephanie's presentation is my favorite quote, is the language is in the land, or the land is in the language, vice versa. And it's also in the language, and I was attending Trade University, and I love that quote because it's so true. For example, like right here in Kenjgewin, when I was growing up, it used to be West Bay. Does everybody remember that? West Bay Reserve number 22. So, and then, but in my lifetime, it was able to be changed to Kenjgewin, to be recognized of its original name, or close to its original name. I believe it's Kenjgewin. So that's another example of how we can practically, or how we are practically using these rights from the Declaration. Another one that I think is a really cool example, and I've always thought or been inspired somehow to have this happen on Manitoulin. Does anybody know where Haida Gwaii is? Where is it, G? BC. It's in BC, beautiful British Columbia. My second favorite place. So Haida Gwaii used to be named the Queen Charlotte Islands. And then the peoples there, there's Haida people there. And over many, many years in contestations with government and forestry, stuff like this, they eventually got their whole island name changed to Haida, to their Indigenous language, their name. I remember reading that book, and I remember visiting it for the first time and being so inspired. I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if Manitoulin Island did this? So if it was how our elder was saying, you know, where we're from, that name, there's no translation. But how do we go back to that? So that could be another proactive way that we're recognizing these declarations or these articles within the declaration. Going back to these sessions, Quinn was probably one of the first young people who really stood up and connected with it, how he's living it or how he can live it as a young person. So it was really cool. At each of these sessions, all the young people would get these little booklets. And he would be traveling all around Ontario, going to all these conferences, and all the time I'd see him whip it out at different conferences. So it's no longer a youth engagement session. He'd be at a Chiefs of Ontario meeting, he'd whip it out, and then he'd refer to it when he's talking to the chiefs. And it was so inspiring to see him connect with it and be able to verbally say what he knew connected and how he could guide or share his input from a young person's perspective because of the education and the knowledge that he had learned. I think there's many more opportunities that we can show this. And it doesn't have to be huge and it doesn't need a lot of money. I think in organizing the Love Struckenquet project with young people here, we didn't have a budget, we didn't have, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's just when you're getting together with a group of people and you kind of want the similar, same things, and you have an idea of what you're working towards, then anything's really possible. I think some of the huge learning experiences also have affected me about learning, spending time with elders that I've been able to do. And I think working with the young girls group now, that's what I need to do more of, bringing those opportunities. So, I think that's about it. We're going to do some fun activities now and get moving around. Hey, guys.
Okay, so what Lindsay was saying, it doesn't have to be huge or it could be small, but the reality is there's a lot of things in implementing all of these articles that you're probably already are doing or that you have ideas. So that's what our activity is going to be about. So you're going to be in, where's everybody going? Tasha. So what we're going to do is you're going to have 7 groups, and each group is going to get a piece of paper, and they're going to be different amounts, eh? You're going to get a couple articles from here. Okay? They're not the full articles either, they're condensed. So what you're going to do is you're going to share some ideas about implementing those articles. And it could be things you're already doing, or some ideas that you might have, or something might have come up, or just in your discussion, in your group work, things will just fly. Right, Rich?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we'll have that stuff out, so there'll be 7 tables. How many tables do we have? Yeah, there'll be 7, all just 7 tables, so if you're not at a table, come and join, and we'll get started. Okay.
Article 8, individuals have the right not to be subjected to forced assimilation or destruction of their culture.
Yeah.
States shall provide prevention of any action which has the effect of or of their cultural values or ethnic any action which has the effect of dispossessing their lands, territories, or resources, or enforce the population transfer, which has the limit or violating their rights, any form of forced assimilation or injury, any form of propaganda designed to promote or incite racial or ethnic discrimination
You can write it, you can draw it, you can do whatever you want.
So, do you want me to continue, or do you guys want to start? One at a time? Okay, so number one,
I'm just doing one table.
there are 14 articles.
What'd you get 14?
No, they have 8 through 14.
Oh, 8 to 14.
Crap, my feet. What's that?
Individuals have the right not to be subjected to forced substance Number 2, states shall provide effective mechanisms for prevention of and redress for sections A, any action which has the aim or effect of depriving them of the opportunity as distinct or of their cultural values or ethnic identities. Any action which has the aim or effect of dispossessing their lands, territories, and resources. C, any form of forced population transfer which has the aim or effect of violating or undermining any of their rights. D, any form of forced assimilation or integration. E, any form of propaganda designed to incite racial or ethnic discrimination directed against them.
So examples of what you're doing, or what you could be doing. Yeah, you're doing. It doesn't have to be what you're doing. But yeah, if it's what you do, if it's just ideas, how you can do that possible.
Okay, so I think what comes to my mind is we're asserting our right to
So basically is just so 15 is specific to right to culture, tradition, history. So just that, you don't have to write it here. Yeah. So it is, or copy it. Yeah. So there might be something that somebody at the table is doing, or you have an idea. Yeah. But you don't have to write it down. You guys are doing what you're doing is you have a set articles. You're going to take your articles, and I just want to find an example of either what you're doing or what you're doing. You guys have ideas?
So how do we do the robot piece?
poke you in the eye?
That's violence against women,
People are looking in. They want to know. So weird using an iPad. That's on a stand. You can switch the screen there seamlessly.
Because how can they tell where they want to tell when you're not starting?
Military activities shall not take place in the lands or territories of the regions justified by a relevant public interest or otherwise or request to violate Indigenous peoples' concerns.
Good memory. Yeah.
The state shall undertake effective consultations with Indigenous peoples concerning appropriate procedures and to implement together their representative institutions prior to their lands or territories from those activities. So Article 30 is
Yes, not for retaliation.
it's just abrogation. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. But games all have rules, which are very exciting. There's always a way to, yeah. So, Article 38 states, in consultation and cooperation with the Indigenous peoples, shall take the appropriate measures, including legislative measures, to achieve the end of the aspiration. So that would be practicing
Assert our right to vote. How do we say that?
What we did last year.
What's that?
They're trying to get government office and they just syndrome.
Canberra. So activism. To be more active than syndrome.
So you're saying you could do it?